refugees. My children are at home and are yet to go to school. We have many needs and would like to get more assistance. Those living in the camp face overcrowding, poor sanitation and inadequate access to essential services. The camp has recorded cases of measles and cholera, and aid agencies fear the crowded conditions will encourage further spread of diseases. Kusania says the humanitarian needs are increasing and more assistance is needed to care for the refugees in the camp.
Support is needed to be able to provide nutrition for the children and the pregnant and lactating mothers that are finding themselves into the country. Support is needed to be able to ensure that we have adequate shelter for this particular category of people. Support is needed to be able to ensure that food is actually available to this category of person, including human resource to be able to provide psychosocial and GBV response to the populations that we are seeing arriving into the country.
Like the rest of East Africa, Kenya is facing a severe drought, which has made more than 4 million people food insecure. Aid agencies warn of famine in Somalia if there is not enough support to increase humanitarian assistance. Mohammed Yusuf for VOA News, Nairobi.
France has resolved a days-long spite with Italy's right-wing government by agreeing to take in a ship carrying more than 200 migrants rescued in the Mediterranean Sea. The Ocean Viking is due to dock in the southern French port of Toulon on today, Friday. But relations with Rome remain bitter. As Lisa Bryan reports from Paris, the spite underscores Europe's unresolved dilemma of how to jointly handle asylum seekers, including those from Ukraine.
For the 234 migrants aboard Ocean Viking, France's agreement to take them in was the end of a long odyssey. They hail from a mix of countries, including Bangladesh, Syria, and Eritrea. And they count among hundreds rescued from the Mediterranean in late October by NGO SOS Méditerranée and the Red Cross. Italian officials finally allowed 3 boatloads to disembark, but not the Ocean Viking. French Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin called Rome's behavior unacceptable and warned there would be strong consequences in bilateral relations. France and Germany are expected to each welcome 1/3 of those on board. The rest will reportedly be shared among other European Union member states. Questions over fairly sharing asylum seekers, many arriving in Europe via the Mediterranean, aren't new. For years, frontline countries like Italy and Greece have demanded that other EU members take in more. But tensions have sharpened since Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni came to power in Italy. In France, the main opposition, the anti-immigrant far-right National Rally Party, also opposed letting Ocean Vikings migrants ashore. It would make France a suction cup for immigration, said party president Jordan Bardella. It would be unending. The several 100,000 non-European asylum seekers who have arrived in the EU this year dwarf the more than 1 million who surged into the bloc in 2015. But that number doesn't include the more than 4 million Ukrainian refugees who have been granted automatic asylum in the EU. Reports suggest migrant shelters in places such as Brussels, the EU's de facto capital, are packed, with Ukrainians getting priority. Lorena Martini, who specializes in migration at the European Council on Foreign Relations think tank, says the Ukraine crisis should galvanize more European solidarity toward asylum seekers from elsewhere. Some countries that once shunned migrants, like Poland, are now taking a major share of Ukrainian refugees. Some fear Europe's welcome mat for Ukrainians might disappear as well as winter sets in, possibly driving a new refugee influx westward. Lisa Bryant for VOA News, Paris.
A court in Kenya has allowed prosecutors to withdraw a $60 million fraud case against the country's deputy president, who was elected in August. Juma Majanga reports from Nairobi.
In granting the request by the prosecution to withdraw the $60 million corruption case against Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua on Thursday, Anti-Corruption Court Magistrate Victor Wakumile cited insufficient evidence. Gachagua was charged with corruption in July of last year with 9 other people and companies and was released after depositing a cash bail equal to about $100,000. he has denied any wrongdoing. Earlier this month, Kenya's Director of Public Prosecutions, Nurdin Haji, asked the court to allow the withdrawal of the corruption charges against the newly elected deputy president. The court, however, has warned the accused persons that they may be rearrested in future over the same charges should investigators find evidence. A number of cases involving allies of President William Ruto have been withdrawn by prosecutors since Ruto was elected president and formed Kenya's new government. Juma Majanga, VOA Africa News Center, Nairobi, Kenya.
You are listening to Daybreak Africa on the Voice of America. I am James Butte in Washington. Today is Friday, November 11. And still to come on our program, Samson O'Malley Sports. In South Sudan, the leader of the rebel National Salvation Front, also known as NAS, says his group will not take part in what he calls sham elections if and whenever the vote is held. General Thomas Cirillo says the atmosphere is not ripe to hold any elections in South Sudan. He cites ongoing battles between President Salva Kiir's government and opposition groups and a displaced population. According to the 2018 Revitalized Peace Agreement, South Sudan's first general elections since gaining independence in 2011 should have taken place in March this year, but the process has been riddled with delays. Cirillo and other members of the South Sudan Opposition Movement Alliance, also known as SOMA, have yet to ratify the agreement. It was reported late last month that Cirillo, who reportedly left the Opposition Alliance, had returned to the group. But Cirillo tells me that he never left and that it was all propaganda that he had left the group.
The National Salvation Front has never left any alliance. NAS is one of the biggest opposition groups in the country and is the major party of the Soma Alliance. But due to differences among the members, one member, the South Sudan United Front South, was dismissed, and another party, the Real SPLM, refused to sign Soma Charter. So this technically ceasing to be a member. So James, NAS has not rejoined any alliance. These are fabrications aimed at advancing negative propaganda against NAS and to cause confusion among our members and the people of South Sudan.
So the last time I spoke with you, General, you and your group had not ratified the Revitalized Comprehensive Peace Agreement. Are you ready this time to ratify that agreement?
We rejected the access agreement and we refused to sign this agreement because the agreement is flawed and never addressed the root causes of the conflict. We still maintain this position, James, today, and now 4 years later, we stand vindicated and correct in our position, our political analysis, and our assessment. This agreement has not brought about the peace that our people were yearning for, and the period of this government is expiring in February next year.
General, there are talks of elections soon to come in South Sudan. Do you think the atmosphere is ripe for elections in South Sudan, and would you participate?
It's not ripe for elections to be held in South Sudan. There are different types of wars, James, in South Sudan as we talk. The government is fighting the opposition groups that did not sign the agreement, plus the ongoing communities wars. Half of the population of South Sudan is outside the country as refugees, and the rest inside the country. Most of them are displaced. Any fair elections, James, require peace in the first place, and then freedom and fair processes which are not there in South Sudan. For example, fair and legal political party registration, other legal processes, and then voter registration and census. The issue of the conflict in South Sudan must be addressed first before any elections are conducted in the country. So the National Salvation Front, for these reasons, will not take part in any sham elections that will only help in legitimizing the status quo to continue destroying the country, killing our people, and destabilizing the whole country.
Thank you so much again, General. It's very, very nice to talk with you, and welcome back.
Thank you very much, James.
General Thomas Cirillo Swaka is the leader of the rebel National Salvation Front of South Sudan. A Zambian gender activist says the worrying trend in Zambia about gender-based violence is the growing number of women who are being killed. Beauty Katebe, who is also former chair of the Zambia National Women's Lobby, says Zambian women need protection. This after Zambian police on Thursday say they recorded 8,790 cases of gender-based violence countrywide during the third quarter of 2022. Katebe tells me that married couples and children in Zambia need protection.
I think the reaction is always the same because anything that is negative, the expectation of a normal citizen yesterday, because the one we are experiencing today is characterized by killings. Either a woman will kill a man or a man will kill a woman, of course with a bias towards the women being the most victim in the cases. What I would want to say is that maybe even as I speak to you, I would still urge the families to strengthen efforts in the protection of the married couples, children, and of course the women in these cases. It's quite alarming that it becomes very difficult for me, even as an activist, to comment on them because the worrisome situation, as it were.
Tell me which one you think is correct, Beauty. Some people are blaming this on frustration by men because of what they call the poor economy in Zambia, while others are saying that this is just due to power play where men try to exercise their superiority over women. Which one is accurate?
It's actually both because, as I mentioned earlier, a good number of women are dependent on men. And those men, if they don't find anything meaningful that they should do to bring food on the table, of course there is that frustration, there is that anger, and it brings a lot of confusion in the home. There are certain households that are living below $1 per day. Those are houses where you find that people fight even over food, over a very small amount of money that was supposed to be spent on this, and the wife has spent it on a different thing, and there will be a big fight.
Thank you so much again, Beauty. It's very nice to talk with you.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to talk to you too.
Beauty Katebe is a Zambian gender activist and former chair of the Zambian National Women's Lobby. She was speaking with us from the capital, Lusaka. Liberia is expected to conduct a national census beginning today, Friday, to determine the actual population of the country. But the outcome of the census remains unclear as there have been controversies leading up to its launch. Moses Gaziewu reports from Monrovia.
The Liberian constitution mandates that a national population and housing census be conducted every 10 years to determine the actual number of people living in the country. But it's already been 14 years since the last one was conducted in 2008. The government has struggled with funding and corruption issues surrounding officials from the Liberia Institute of Statistics and Geoinformation Services, or LIGIS, the institution responsible to conduct the census. There have been pockets of protests across the country carried out by those being trained to conduct the census. A member of the Liberian House of Representatives with oversight for the procedure, Larry Yonkwe, says the country is not ready. He wants a pause to the process.
I'm calling on my colleagues, for the senators and the representatives of me, to stop this thing temporarily. We look at 17,000 persons from the Jew and Porto system, meaning that all partisanship, all family relationship, all will be put out. Let us go on record that these people were trained for 10 solid days.
Representative Yonkwe fears that efforts could be disrupted and boycotted due to the failure of the government to pay census workers and also experts who were tasked to carry out training for trainers.
I'm not sure whether 30% of the people that are supposed to be paid have been paid. The master trainer that trained the TOT trainers. Then those that were the trainees of the TOT who are now in the countries to train our people have not been paid.
I visited on Thursday evening the office of Legis. I noticed that coordinators were still on the premises of the facility waiting for their assignments and monetary support to go into the field. Even in the counties, there seems to be an unwillingness on the part of some of those expected to count the population.
I am not prepared because from the day we came for this warm training, we are there over 3 weeks and nothing has been done by Legis. They are not giving a dime they are not giving us.
Civil society has also questioned the credibility of the census, doubting its outcome. Among those doubters is Anasi Mame, who is the head of the Center for Transparency and Accountability in Liberia, Censors. He said those heading the lack the credibility to conduct a transparent process.
LACC has come up with its revenge allegations of corruption against the officials that are overseeing this process, and so to the best of our recollection, nothing has really happened. The appointing authority has not acted, and their continued presence at the helm authority alleges to oversee this process pose a dent on the reputation of the process.
Earlier this year, the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission indicted 2 senior officials of Legis for corruption, but I still superintended the census. Memi also fears that people might not be counted due to inadequate planning. As Liberians will be staying home today to be counted, most of them are not sure how the process will proceed due to a lack of civic education. Meanwhile, our attempts to speak to Legis officials failed to materialize as for some unexplained reasons, I was not able to meet with the head of the center, Wimmer Smith. The government could not also declare its position as the Information Minister Ledger Hureni via mobile phone directed me to Legis for an official statement. Liberians will be at home, but it's not clear they will be counted if census workers fail to canvass all areas. Moses Gazeo, VOA News, Monrovia.
It is time now for Daybreak Africa Sports, and here is Samson Omale in Abuja, Nigeria. A very good Friday morning to you, Samson.
Good Friday morning to you too, James. We begin the sports with the final preparations for the